All right, let's talk about Thomas Jefferson. You know, the name just sounds like American history, right? He's the guy we all learn about, the brilliant founding father, the big champion of liberty. But what if that story, the one we all know, is only half the story?
I mean, the picture we get is this, super consistent statesman, a real man of the people. He even grew 20 kinds of peas at Monticello. It's this simple, almost comforting picture of a great leader. But that picture, it's been carefully cropped to leave out some really uncomfortable stuff.
The real Jefferson, well, he was a whole lot more complicated. We're talking about a man of huge, challenging, and honestly, super uncomfortable contradictions. And here's the thing, if we really dig in and try to untangle his paradoxes, we might just learn something about the ones that are still tangled up in America today. So his presidency kicks off with something he actually called the Revolution of 1800. Now, this wasn't a revolution with guns and battles. No, it was an election. But it showed this huge shift in what Americans were looking for. They wanted a more democratic kind of politics. And believe me, this revolution was messy. I mean, truly chaotic. For the very first time, you had political parties really going at it, campaigning against each other. And then get this, a glitch in the electoral college system causes a tie, but not between Jefferson and his opponent. It was a tie between Jefferson and his own running mate, Aaron Burr. Can you imagine? The House of Representatives had to vote 36 times, 36, to finally break the tie. But you know what the really revolutionary part was? A peaceful transfer of power from one rival party to another. That was the big test for this new country, and amazingly, it passed.
So Jefferson's big campaign slogan was pretty simple, right? Jefferson and liberty. It's powerful. But the thing is, for hundreds of thousands of people living in America at the time, that promise of liberty, it was completely empty.
And this is where the paradox just slaps you in the face. Just look at the ideal versus the reality. On one hand, he writes the most famous words in American history, all men are created equal. But then, in his own private notes, he's writing about the inherent inferiority of Black people. He's the champion of freedom, right? But he owned over 600 human beings during his lifetime. A so-called man of principle who literally sold people to pay for his expensive wine and books. I mean, the gap between what he said and what he did, it's just staggering. So that leaves us with a really, really tough question. If the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence didn't seem to believe that all men are created equal applied to all men, then what does that phrase even mean? What are we supposed to do with that? It's a question America has been wrestling with ever since. And you better believe the enslaved people weren't just sitting around waiting for this liberty to be handed to them. No way. They were fighting for it, using the same revolutionary ideas everyone was talking about. Think about this. In 1800, the very same year Jefferson wins with his liberty slogan, an enslaved blacksmith named Gabriel plans a massive rebellion in Virginia. The goal? To take their freedom. The plot was discovered, and Gabriel and 25 of his followers were executed. And the state's reaction? It wasn't, maybe we should think about this. It was pure fear. They cracked down, making the slave laws even harsher, trying to stamp out any spark of rebellion.
Okay, so we've got this huge contradiction around liberty. But what was Jefferson's grand vision for America anyway? What was he aiming for? He talked about building an empire of liberty, which sounds a little odd, right? An empire of liberty. But his whole idea, the core of it, was all about the small, independent farmer.
And his blueprint for this was super clear. Number one, make the government smaller, cut taxes, especially that hated whiskey tax. Shrink the army, shrink the navy, pay off the national debt. And the big goal behind all of it? Create a whole country of self-sufficient small farmers. He wanted to avoid big industrial cities and a powerful central government like they had in England at all costs. Okay, you see the pattern here, right? Here comes the next big contradiction. Because once he was actually in the president's chair, the real world, the messy reality of governing, forced him to basically throw a lot of his own core beliefs right out the window. First up, a challenge from the Supreme Court. In a landmark case, Marbury v. Madison, the court, which was led by his political rival, John Marshall, just gave itself a huge new power. It's called judicial review. And what it means is that the Supreme Court can look at a law passed by Congress and say, nope, that's unconstitutional. The thing is, that power isn't actually written down anywhere in the Constitution. So right away, the federal government is getting bigger and more powerful, exactly what he didn't want. But then Jefferson himself does something that just blows his whole philosophy to pieces. See, he was what's called a strict constructionist. That's a fancy way of saying he believed the government could only do things that were specifically written down in the Constitution. If it's not in the book, you can't do it. Simple. But then an opportunity comes along that was definitely not in the book. And that opportunity was the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon over in France needed cash, like a lot of cash, to pay for his wars. So he makes this unbelievable offer to the U.S., the entire Louisiana territory, for just $15 million. It was the deal of a lifetime, a total game changer. But for Jefferson, the guy who believed you stick to the rules, well, this was a huge problem. The Constitution said nothing about buying foreign land. But he just couldn't say no. And just to give you an idea of what a crazy bargain this was, that $15 million is about $250 million in today's money. I mean, that's a fraction of what it costs to build one modern aircraft carrier. And for that price, he doubled the size of the entire country. It was maybe the best real estate deal in history. But it was also a massive, unprecedented use of presidential power, done by the one guy who swore he would limit that exact kind of power. And yeah, the contradictions just keep on coming. So Britain and France were messing with American ships on the high seas. Jefferson's solution? The Embargo Act. And this thing was a colossal use of federal power, one of the biggest the young country had ever seen. The idea was to punish Britain by cutting off all foreign trade. The theory was, hey, they need our stuff more than we need theirs. Well, the reality was a complete disaster. It didn't really hurt Britain that much, but it absolutely crushed the American economy. Exports dropped by 80%. But here's the real kicker, the biggest irony of it all. Because we couldn't get goods from Europe anymore, we had to start making them ourselves. The embargo basically forced American manufacturing to get started, the very thing Jefferson wanted to avoid. So when you just take a step back and look at the whole picture of his presidency, this pattern just becomes crystal clear. His entire legacy is defined by these shocking, jarring contradictions. He said he wanted a small government, but his actions made the federal government way bigger. He dreamed of a nation of farmers, but his policies kickstarted factories and industry. And the biggest one of all, he talked endlessly about freedom and liberty, but he expanded a nation that was fundamentally built on the backs of enslaved people. So in the end, you just can't put Jefferson in a simple box. He's not just a hero, and he's not just a villain. He's kind of America in a nutshell. He represents our absolute best ideals and our absolute worst failures, all wrapped up in one person. And I think trying to understand him, really grappling with his legacy, means we have to grapple with the complicated, messy, contradictory soul of America itself. Failures, all wrapped up in one person. And I think trying to understand him, really grappling with his legacy, means we have to grapple with the complicated, messy, contradictory soul of America itself.